Have you ever been seized with mortal anguish? Seized with mortal anguish. All right, so mortal anguish, I think of somebody who's experiencing intense mental or emotional suffering. Leads one to a spot of, or not leads, finds himself in a spot of like helplessness, despair. It can even be accompanied by physical pain, like mortal anguish. Esther is in that spot. I love it how the church every year presents to us, gives us the story of Esther in this chapter in the first week of Lent. Esther, in this time, Esther was in the 500 BC. At the time, the Jews had been dispersed by the king of Persia. King Esther herself is a Jew, and instead of being dispersed, the king caught eye of Esther, and Esther was a beautiful woman, both inside and out, and he took Esther to be his wife, but her being a Jew was hidden, and so he didn't know she was a Jew. Her uncle Mordecai is the one who raised her up, who was left behind with Esther. And where this takes place right now in the reading is that a decree just went out. A decree went out to kill all Jews, and man, woman, child. And they get word of this, and Mordecai comes to Esther and say, "Don't you understand, Esther? God has planned, like, the reason why you're the wife of the king here, like, God has destined you to save the people. You've got to move, you've got to act, you've got to do something." And at this point, Esther, realizing even if she goes to the king and says, like, "I'm a Jew," good chance she's going to be killed. She's got all this honor. She's in a spot of mortal anguish. First verse today, Queen Esther, seized with mortal anguish. We get a formula, I propose, for us to follow when we're in a spot seized with mortal anguish. Seized with mortal anguish, Esther had recourse to the Lord. You might say, well, duh, Father Mark, if you're in a spot of mortal anguish, what are you going to do other than turn to the Lord? It's like, really? It is incredibly easy to not turn to the Lord. Like, even think on smaller scales, lesser degree of like we can turn to other things to numb the mortal anguish, to not give it to light. So first thing is recourse to the Lord. Second thing, have your face hit the floor. That's what Esther happened. She had recourse to the Lord. What's it say? Period. Next sentence. She lay prostrate upon the ground. It's like, you're in a spot of mortal anguish? What else is there to do, really? Rather than to have your face hit the floor before the Lord. Next thing, she lay prostrate upon the ground with who? Not alone, together with her handmaids. I think another step of the formula when we're in a spot of mortal anguish is to be in communion with others. Somebody else who walks with the Lord, that you can be with, confide in, and can pray with you and for you when it's a bad spot. And then lastly here, it says, as a child, this is Esther saying this, as a child I used to hear from the books. I used to hear from the books of my forefathers that you, O Lord, always flee those who are pleasing to you. But now help me, who am alone and have no one but you, O Lord my God. And so the last part of this recourse to the Lord of this formula is to read the Bible. That's what Esther did. She recalled the books that she was raised with her parents and with Mordecai, to be remembered of the Lord, of growing in trust and confidence. So question for us this morning, question for me is like, what is our recourse in these spots? Like, do we have recourse to the Lord? Or what are those other spots that we maybe, that's not the Lord, that have a tendency to turn to? And for us to have this quick recourse, to follow this formula that Esther did in this spot of mortal anguish, to ask, to seek, and to knock, as the Lord tells us in the gospel as well.